Welcome to the Founder's Code, where we explore the rise and fall of empires. Today, we're exploring Boeing's journey, full of ambition, tragedy, and corporate collapse. What went wrong for this aviation giant? It all started in 1916 with a wooden seaplane built in a boathouse. In fact, the very first Boeing planes were not built in a factory, but in the converted boathouses of Seattle's Lake Union. The company founder, William Boeing, wasn't even an engineer or a pilot. He was a businessman who loved boats. But he learned fast, and within just a few years, his company began dominating the U.S. Mailplane contracts. For 4 decades, Boeing would set the standard for innovation, quality, and sheer awfulness. During World War II, Boeing built the infamous B-17 bomber, which went on to be called the Flying Fortress. The Boeing 747 is a total game changer. Launched in 1969, its iconic hump made flying fun, with lounges and bars turning airports into must-visit spots for plane lovers. For a while, it seemed like nothing could stop Boeing. They were America's favorite plane manufacturer and one of the most trusted names in the world. Then everything changed. Warning in 1997, Boeing merged with another aerospace giant, McDonnell Douglas. But the merger was widely seen as a way for Boeing to buy out McDonnell Douglas rather than the other way around. The deal left many McDonnell Douglas employees feeling demoralized. Plus, the 747 was starting to get old. Engineers knew it needed major updates to meet new safety standards. So Boeing's engineers turned their focus to a simpler, cheaper project, the 787 Dreamliner. This plane was revolutionary. It was the first airliner with a fuselage made mostly from carbon fiber composite, which was lighter and stronger than aluminum. As a result, the Dreamliner used 20% less fuel per mile than competing jets. It was a hit with airlines and passengers alike. But there was a problem. Counterclockwise arrows button in 2004, a European consortium led by Airbus launched a competing jet. They called it the A320neo. The Neo stood for New Engine Option, which meant it was the same basic design as the A320 that had been flying since 1991, except now it was fitted with newer, more efficient engines. It was a smart move, and by 2017, the A320neo outsold the 737 by a factor of 4 to 1. This created an urgent problem for Boeing. They needed a new plane that could compete with the A320neo, but it was too late to start developing a brand new design. The only thing they could do was redesign the 737, but that wouldn't be easy either. First of all, the 737 had been flying since 1967, 50 years ago. It had a thick, heavy fuselage and outdated engines. If Boeing wanted to replace the 737 with a modern design, they would have to spend billions of dollars. But the real problem was that the 737 was so popular that airlines were constantly buying it. By 2015, over 10,000 had been sold. So if Boeing decided to ground the 737, they risked losing their biggest customer. Instead, Boeing executives opted to save money and redesign the 737's flight control software. They wanted to keep the same design, but add new engines. This way, they could tout the 737 as an all-new design without having to put in the hard work and expense of making it one. Laptop computer, but the problem was that the 737 software was not up to the task. It was full of bugs. In fact, there were so many problems that Boeing engineers referred to the code as spaghetti code. So to compensate for the flawed software, they added a new system called MCAS, or Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System. Basically, MCAS was a kind of autopilot. It used a single faulty sensor to collect data about the plane's angle of attack. Then it would adjust the 737's trim control to keep the plane stable. Now, the problem is that no pilot was ever told about MCAS. If they had been, they might have noticed that they no longer had direct control of the plane's trim controls. Or they may have realized that a malfunction in one sensor could cause a catastrophic error. If the sensor reading was wrong, MCAS would try to compensate, which would make the plane dive. And that's exactly what happened in October of 2018. A Lion Air 737 MAX 8 was taking off from Indonesia for a short flight to Malaysia. But seconds after takeoff, the plane began to shake violently. The pilot struggled to regain control and tried desperately to disconnect the autopilot. But it was too late. The plane nosedived into the ocean. All 189 people on board died. At first, investigators were puzzled because the pilots had no history of mechanical error. But then they discovered the MCOS software, and all became clear. Boeing had added this software to solve a problem that was actually part of the problem. They failed to tell pilots about it, and they failed to add backup sensors. When a faulty sensor told MCOS that the plane was about to stall, it pushed the nose down. But there was no one in the cockpit to stop it. Crying face, it was a devastating crash, and the world was shocked that such a thing could happen. But they were even more shocked in March of 2019 when an Ethiopian Airlines 737 MAX 8 crashed under almost identical circumstances. Every bit of evidence pointed to the MCOS software. This time, 157 people lost their lives. The world was demanding answers. And what did Boeing do? They tried to cover up. Detective-leaked emails revealed that Boeing employees had mocked regulators and called them dull and unintelligent. Other emails showed that Boeing was fully aware of the deadly risks of MCOS, but did little to address them. One employee emailed another saying, "For any pilots out there, better Google how to turn off that new Boeing trick. I just did a training in the sim and it is crazy. I'm still shaking." An internal Boeing document said that MCOS was basically a black box to pilots. Once the system kicked in, there was no way to know why. Whistleblowers said that whenever they brought up concerns about the 737, managers would ignore them or retaliate against them. Multiple investigations would later call it a culture of concealment. The company was so focused on profits that it cut corners. That much was clear. But what was also clear was that Boeing was a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Any fine they had to pay could be absorbed into their overall budget. In other words, the company itself could afford to be negligent, but the people who died or were injured could not. Money with wings, so how bad was the fallout? Well, Boeing's stock crashed along with their reputation. Their CEO was forced to resign, and the 737 was grounded worldwide. Hundreds of thousands of flights had to be canceled. The cost to airlines was enormous, not to mention the loss of life. So to answer today's question, what went wrong at Boeing? They sacrificed their number one value, safety. In the early days, their priority was always to build the safest, most reliable planes possible. But sometime after the merger with McDonnell Douglas, this changed. Executives became greedy and myopic. They stopped looking to the future and started thinking about profits. They took risks with the 737, then lied to cover it up. The end result was tragic. But that's not the end of the story. Performing arts in hindsight, it's easy to see how this all could have been prevented. Boeing used to be known for their safety and reliability. But when they sacrificed those things for speed and profits, they paid the ultimate price. This is the host. Thanks for watching till the end, and I'll see you in the next video.